So we all remember the story of Veronica, a very rich engineer who was betrayed by her friend Mildred and her father, who was still in the hospital due to shock of the way his wife had passed. So let's return back to the story and let's get to know what happened to Mildred and how Veronica navigates her life after the betrayal from her friend Mildred. Veronica was done with the estate as she had promised the occupant of the estate using the new construction company she had contacted. Everything was going on smooth as planned. Life was returning back to normal. She wasn't feeling tensed anymore with the betrayal of Mildred. She had returned fully to what she wanted to do, forgetting all Mildred had done to her, sticking with Emerald, who was always by her side, giving her little support that she could. And few days after, Mildred was out of prison. She was so excited to be breathing the fresh air, no longer in the prison, no longer having to spend time with people she don't know. She felt so happy. But returning back to reality was so hard for Mildred, as the hatred she had for Veronica was to be compared with nothing. This time around, it wasn't just that she hated the fact that Veronica had everything, but Veronica had sent her to prison rather than sitting down and talking things out. Who does Veronica think she is to send her to prison? Is that how friends behave? She thought to herself. How dare she? Does she even know who I am and what I'm capable of doing to her? I can destroy the empire she has built, Mildred thought to herself while sitting down on the bed. She knew that the fact that Veronica had sent her to prison had ruined and made her company suffer greatly. The major reason why Mildred hated Veronica with passion was the fact that Veronica had promised to always stick by her when things had gone sour for her family. Just for Veronica to invest in the company and became the sole director of the company, ordering everybody around, even her staff. But that wasn't what they agreed. Veronica had promised to help her as a friend and not to come into her company and turn the company to hers. Mildred hated that part of Veronica, but she kept calm and laid low with the mindset that when she was able to dupe her huge sum of money from the building project, she was going to get back on her feet. Unknown to her that there was someone that was going to speak. There was somebody that was going to scatter her plan that she had sat down to calculate. Although she didn't know who this person was, but she was hell-bent on finding whoever did this to her. Who made Veronica find out everything that she had planned? Who made her go to prison? She had promised to send hell to that person. After a few days of Mildred coming out from the prison, after sitting down to think about her life, feeling betrayed by Veronica, feeling bad for everything that had happened, she decided to go pay Veronica a visit. And when she got to Veronica's office, she sincerely apologized for everything that had happened. She gave that pity face. And Veronica looked at her and told her, I am so grateful that you've come back to your senses. And I'm very, very sorry that everything had to go down this way. It wouldn't have gotten bad, but this was something I had to do with lives. And I really felt betrayed. How could you use inferior materials? Even if you planned stealing from me, probably you would have used good materials. Why trying to steal from me and at the end of the day, endangering people's life? That's not how to do something. Mildred just kept on looking at her. No emotions, not saying anything. But what was going down her mind was, who told you? How did you find out? Because whosoever told you, I am going to hunt that person down. Meanwhile, Veronica was there explaining her heart to Mildred, telling Mildred that she had forgiven her and she really hoped that they go back to being friends and everything turns out being great for them. And when she was done, Mildred thanked her and left. But the moment Mildred stepped out of the office, Veronica knew she could never ever trust Mildred again. As Not just that she felt betrayed by Mildred, but she could see the fact that Mildred wasn't feeling remorse in any way. So she drew a line between them. They could be friends from a distance, but there was nothing that was going to bring them close. And she had called Emerald immediately to tell Emerald that Mildred had come to visit her. And if Emerald still wants to be friends with Mildred, she had no issue with it. But please and please, Emerald should not bring any issue concerning Mildred to her, as she wasn't going to pay any attention to it. Once bitten, twice shy. She wasn't going to fall for Mildred pity-party face anymore. And as the days went by, with Veronica constantly going to check up on her father, and one day, when she arrived, she was so surprised to see that her father had woken up from coma. Veronica screamed for joy. She couldn't just express how happy she was. Not just that her dad had recovered, but he was perfectly fine. He wasn't having any stroke or anything that could make him feel pain of what he had gone through. Though the moment he opened his eyes, he asked of his wife, and he kind of recalled what had happened. And he had to take it in good faith, believing that everything was going to be fine. Veronica was really excited. She gradually cleaned her father's body, gave him proper meal, and kept on massaging his hands. She couldn't just contain her joy. Her dad was finally awake. Her dad, her pillar, her joy giver, was back to life. Though she really missed her mom, as her mom was her best friend. Her mom and her dad had taught her everything she knew about business, as they were best friends, as they did everything together. That was the kind of marriage Veronica really wanted. She didn't want the marriage that was going to weigh her down, or a marriage that was going to make her feel less of herself, even though she was rich. She wanted a marriage that had great communication, a marriage that made each other people feel love, a marriage that thinks about themselves first, a marriage that understands that it is them before anybody. So she always told her dad, and after a few weeks of spending time in the hospital with her dad was finally discharged and was ready to go home. When her dad got back home, he decided to give his wife a befitting burial. He buried the love of his life in a very beautiful way, filling her grave with beautiful flowers. That was something he had always looked forward to. Though not the way it had happened, but he had always dreamt of both of them getting buried together and Veronica decorating their grave with flowers. It pained him deeply, but he knew that it was time to go back to work. It was time to face life for what it was. And after the burial of his wife, the building was commissioned and every occupant moved in. They all thanked him greatly for his kindness, for his love, for his support to the community. Who would have ever thought that someone would do this? Having heard what he had gone through, no one even believed that he was going to still come through with the project. But he remembered his promise to the young boy, and he knew that he couldn't give up on that. He was so grateful to his daughter Veronica, who had stood firmly and made sure that that project came to an end. The building and the plan was exactly what he had envisioned, what he had already told her prior to his sickness. He was so glad that his daughter could bring everything they had discussed to life. He really thanked her greatly, and he told her, "My darling daughter, you're really a blessing to me. I really appreciate you. You're really not the kind of kid that a parent should worry about. You took care of me when I was sick and still handled everything effortlessly. You're really a strong lady. And I pray that a man who values you above anything come your way, as I won't want you to suffer in this life because you've already gone through a lot as a child. Thank you very much, my daughter." Veronica smiled and told her father, "Dad, I'm supposed to take care of you. If I don't take care of you, who will? I'm your daughter, so I should do that." Her father was excited. Mr. Kenneth was glad. He knew he had someone to rely on, and that was his daughter, and no one else. After his wife was buried, the police had brought the proper report on what had happened the night his wife had the accident. And it was found out that no one had caused the accident. It was a mistake from the driver directly in front of her. And that was what caused her death. So Mr. Kenneth was so grateful that the accident wasn't due to someone, but a natural effect. Though he really missed his wife, and he really appreciated the police for going deep to look for the cause of his wife's death. He was so glad. And he was ready to return back to work. And the day Mr. Kenneth returned back to work, his members of staff were so grateful to have him back. They had really missed him, as Mr. Kenneth was a very loving person, but Veronica was a very strict person. She had no emotions to show to anybody. But Mr. Kenneth was a bit lenient to some things, but Veronica never took anything for granted. Every small thing was a suspect to Veronica. She was called Margaret Tasha. That was the height. Mildred, who was trying to get a job for herself, struggled to get a job, as anyone who heard or knew she had gone to jail would refuse giving her the job, stating that she couldn't be trusted, as the reason for going to jail was due to fraud. So most people weren't willing to employ her. Mildred got frustrated. She put the blame on Veronica. To her, Veronica was the cause of her problem. She felt Veronica had tarnished her image. She felt Veronica had brought her down to the lowest point, and she vowed in her heart that she was going to look for a way to pay Veronica back. Veronica was the reason she's jobless. Veronica was the reason she had a bad profile. Veronica was just the reason for her pain and misery. If Veronica had kept to her word initially, probably she wouldn't have tried to fraud her in any way. But because Veronica did not keep to her word, she now wanted to get a stand. And now she had lost so many things. To her, Veronica was at fault in all ways. One fateful day, while Veronica was coming out of a restaurant, to her greatest surprise, she saw Emmanuel. She couldn't just believe, as Emmanuel wasn't even looking like the Emmanuel she knew. This particular Emmanuel was looking posh. Emmanuel had taken all the money he had gotten from Mildred initially and developed himself. Emmanuel had his own shop and had his own machine, which engineering company come to hire to use during their project. Emmanuel was cashing out and cashing out well. Emmanuel wasn't a beggar. He wasn't frauding anybody anymore. He had turned a new leaf. He was living his best life. And when he saw Veronica, he quickly greeted her, "Good afternoon, ma." Veronica screamed and was shocked and told him, "Emmanuel, how are you doing today?" Emmanuel said, "I'm doing fine, and how do you do?" To which Veronica said she's fine. She was really, really surprised to see him. And they got talking. They tried catching up, and she asked Emmanuel how things were and what he was doing now. To which Emmanuel explained his nature of business. He was still into construction. All he did was to sell construction materials or hire the big machine for engineering firm. Veronica was really impressed, as she had not heard from him after the Mildred incident, and she probably thought he had gone back into his hole. But she never knew that he had taken a step further into making himself better. She was impressed, she was grateful, and she was happy to see him. But as the days went by, Manuel kept in touch with Veronica, as he genuinely loved her. He deeply loved her, but because of what had happened, he decided to keep a low profile. But now that he had stabilized, he told himself that it was time to return to his first love, the lady he saw and fell in love with her immediately. Veronica, on the other hand, was so interested in Emmanuel the way he was to her. And it didn't take long, they started dating. They were always hanging out, going for various dinner, going for various occasions together. It was a known something in the company that the boss' daughter had found someone. Veronica was always excited. She was always blushing. It was like Emmanuel was her mumu button, because the moment Emmanuel came back to her life, she kind of reduced her Margaret Thatcher attitude. People could assess her a bit. She wasn't too uptight. She wasn't too strict. She was a bit relaxed, loving, caring, ready to hear you out before giving her final judgment. People were so glad. Most of the workers said, thank God for that Emmanuel man. Oh. He has really made Madam Veronica soft. In fact, he is her real mumu button. I have a feeling if you touch him, she will craze you. Most workers were really excited, as Veronica was really relaxed when it comes to the affairs of Emmanuel. And as the days went by, with Mr. Kenneth gradually observing his daughter, he asked her one day what she thought about Emmanuel and if she was ready to take it to the next level. Veronica said yes, but she didn't want to pressure him, as she would want Emmanuel to do everything in his own terms. Mr. Kenneth said no problem. Whenever you're ready, I'm always ready for you, provided you love him and you feel he's the best man for you. Please and please, you can go ahead with that. So one day, while Emmanuel and Veronica were having lunch, Emmanuel went down on one knee and asked Veronica to get married to him, to which Veronica accepted, and it didn't take long. They got married and they were living happily. They were always excited. Emmanuel always made Veronica happy, and Veronica was so excited with the presence of Emmanuel. They were so in love with each other. She was gradually living her dreams when it comes to marriage. That was something she had always looked forward to. A marriage like that of her parents, a marriage that was always communicating with one another, a marriage that never allowed each other to go to bed without reconciling any issue. Veronica was so proud of herself that she had found someone that loved her and someone she loved genuinely. But as the days went by, Emerald told Mildred everything Veronica had told her, how Emmanuel was the one who leaked the secret. And when Mildred found out, Mildred was so angry. She was so upset. She thought to herself, wow, so he betrayed me to win her favor, and now he had gotten married to her. I am going to show him who I am. I'm going to make sure he feels the pain I am feeling currently. I'm going to make sure he understands that in life, you don't snitch on everybody. How can he do that to me? Not just that he betrayed me, he made me lose her, and now he has gone to marry her. So now he's the saint to be. Why me, I am devil? I am going to show him Pepe. And as the days went by, Mildred with some group of boys planned and kidnapped Emmanuel on his way returning back from work one day. They tied him in an uncompleted building for days, not feeding him or giving him any kind of water. Mildred wanted to maltreat him and make him feel the pain she was feeling. And after 3 days, she picked up a phone and called Veronica, demanding for a ransom if she wanted to see her husband alive. But that time, Veronica just found out she was pregnant. She wasn't in the state to hear anything that was going to trouble her. So she tried to calm herself down. So she quickly went to her father and told her father that the people that had taken her husband are demanding for a ransom. Her father told her not to worry, that she should generate the ransom. All they needed to do was to look for military officers that were going to deliver the money to whoever they were to deliver the money to. That she shouldn't trouble herself going by herself. They were going to look for equipped, well-trained military men that would take the money to deliver. And that was exactly what Veronica did. Veronica got the money ready and gave it to her father, who gave it to military men to help go deliver in order to get Emmanuel back. So when the military men arrived at the destination Mildred had given them to drop the money, they didn't see anybody, as Mildred was hiding and calling them to drop the money, but they refused dropping the money. Instead, They held the money, demanding that they had to give it to someone, as they didn't want to drop the money and they would say they didn't get it. So Mildred and some group of guys came out from where they were hiding to collect the money. And immediately, the policemen ordered them to stand still so they could arrest them. Mildred ran as fast as she could to where Emmanuel was, and two of the policemen quickly chased after her. On getting there, they asked Mildred to surrender, but Mildred refused. Instead, she was pointing a gun at Emmanuel, stating that she wasn't going to surrender in any way. She was pointing the gun at Emmanuel. Refusing to surrender, threatening to take his life. And by mistake, one of the policemen pulled the trigger and it hit her. Mildred fell down immediately and she lost her life. Veronica felt bad. She felt she had taken the life of her friend. That wasn't the plan all along, and she never even knew that it was Mildred that was behind the whole kidnap. She felt really, really bad. She cried her eyes every single day. Her husband Emmanuel tried to console her, trying to make her understand that Mildred is just one bad egg, and she had no reason to feel bad about it. If she had gone to prison, she would have learned her lesson and tried to live a better life. But Veronica always cried, and after a few days of thinking about it, she helped to give Mildred a befitting burial. To her, giving her a befitting burial was like a consolation to what had happened. So she returned back to work as usual, though she felt bad for what had happened, but she was so glad that her husband was back. Manuel took time off from work. He wanted to spend it with his wife, trying to make her feel comfortable during this period, as she was always looking moody due to what had happened to Mildred. But at the same time, she was working, as she loved to work. But Emmanuel was always by her side, supporting her all the way, never ever wanting her to feel bad for what had happened. And in less than a few months, they welcomed their bundle of joy, and she was named Cassie. Cassie was so beautiful. Cassie was a replica of her mom. Cassie reminded her of her mom. She was so glad. And when her dad carried Cassie, her dad looked at Cassie and said, "My joy has come back to me." Emmanuel and Veronica lived their life happy. Though Veronica still cut ties with Emerald when she had found out that Emerald was the reason her husband got kidnapped. She knew that her friends weren't to be trusted in any way. They were just sticking to her in order to leech her. They only used her when they needed her. Most time, they were only there when it comes to sharing her good news so that they could know what they were going to benefit from it. So Veronica decided to just stick to her family rather than accumulating friends who never ever liked her. The end. Thank you very much for listening to the story of the day. Please do not forget to drop what you've learned and what you feel about the story. It's your favorite storyteller, Zika. Please do not forget to support us by subscribing, liking, sharing our stories to your loved ones. Till we meet again in our next. Bye for now.